Good evening. I'm hereby calling to order hello? The February 27th meeting of the Committee of the Whole. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestrea.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here,
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for meeting this evening. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to give an update and to discuss fundraising opportunities and also anything else that has come up with the Aquatic and Community Center project. So I can begin the meeting with Mr. Sean Ward. Introduce, I don't know who's going to.
So Jason's going to start out with a PowerPoint, and Gavin is here, and Chris Trotta will be joining us shortly to give you an update on the schedule and just kind of a overall project update. And then Ryan will be here shortly. He'll be here in a little bit to,
Okay.
for phase 2.
It's Ryan Sowers.
Ryan Sowers, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jason.
Okay. All right. Can you see it on their end?
We got it on our screen.
Okay. All right. That's the important part then, so. All right. Yeah, we can share this one. Go ahead.
I'm tired.
All right, good evening, everybody. We committed to providing periodic updates on the project, so I put together just a quick presentation to kind of give you an overall update. On the agenda is just, we were going to share a few images that we recently received on some of the pool features that are going within the pool itself. Gavin is going to provide an update on the construction progress and schedule. And then we'll talk about a few next steps items that we have. There we go.
Thank you.
So first off, it was good to see most of the council members out there on, I think it was February 8th when we had a tour. You can see, I mean, at that point there was quite a bit of progress, and we've continued that momentum that we have going. You can really start to envision some of the spaces that are starting to come together and get a good sense for how much really room we're developing and opportunities out there. The project itself is probably somewhere around 42% complete is what I'm calculating at this point. So, and Gavin can certainly walk through some of that. The nice thing though is that we, as most, if you drive by the site, you can see that the buildings are out of the ground. That is, generally in construction, our biggest risk is getting to that point, is starting to build the structure and the frames, and we've done that with all of the buildings that we have. So the first is try to share with you some images that we've got of some of the pool features. I try to white out some of the background because it really isn't representative of what was developed there, but you can see, which is what we want to focus on, just some of the features that are going to go within the pool itself. So this is the zero depth pool, and then just another angle or another image of some of that will be offered to the children. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Gavin to give some updates on construction.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk through some of the construction updates and kind of where we're at from that standpoint. So this is some drone footage that was taken. It's actually almost about 2 weeks old now, and things have progressed even more since then. We wanted to get some updated images today, but it was not conducive for flying the drone, so unfortunately we could not. But you see in that center part, that kind of kidney shape. So that's the northern part of the pool, or that kind of vortex, lazy river area. And then just south of there is that center pool, the lap pool, and the zero depth pool coming off. So that's in really good shape. There's kind of three sequences that we do when we're doing the pool. The bottom, so you can see in this particular instance, they're actually pouring the bottom of that zero depth. Well, that's done. Then we do the walls about 3/4 of the way up, and that's actually done on these pools too. And then we start working on what we call the gutters. It's that top portion of the wall. It's got the channel, it'll receive the water, a lot of the finishes. There's another piece that goes on top of there too, a stainless steel piece. And we're about 90% done with that on this pool and the other pool. So again, even since this 2-week period, they're further progressed. So the pools are going very well. Just kind of, which I guess would be to your right there where you see that crane at. Towards the bottom of the photo is where what we call Pool C is, or that tower will go. We have not started on that portion, and will here very soon start on that tower portion. You won't actually see the towers coming out of the ground because that's being provided by the slide manufacturer that they're in manufacturing now for. But we have to do a pit under that tower and then a run-out pit at the end of the slide. Again, we'll start on that very soon. From a building standpoint, you kind of see that U shape, if you will. In the far background is the gymnasium. So you can see where we've got the gymnasium temporarily closed with some plastic enclosures. And the roof is actually on that gymnasium portion of the building. So we're watertight in there now. Kind of moving towards that center, towards that lower roof. Those two sections, they kind of look white, if you will. Those are metal decked, and we actually have the roofing in that center part done now, and we're working on the other roofing towards what would be the southwest corner of the building. They were supposed to start on that today, obviously, from a weather standpoint, we were able to do that. But we'll continue to do that roofing along that building stretch and down in that corner, and then we'll jump back to the center of the building. What you don't see in this picture, but again, it's progressed, is we've got most of the metal decking on in that center portion of the building. And then that pool building, which is what should be to your left if you're looking at the screen there, we just finished the masonry on that today. So what it'll allow us to do is get the steel on the roofing on that pool building. So the two ends are really the driving factors on the project for getting the pool operational outside of the slides that we're working on there too. Now in the back southwest corner along 480, we've started on the brick in that area, and we'll continue to work on the brick and counterclockwise pattern. So we'll do the back of the building, around the gym, and the front of the building. Then we'll do the pool building. There's not a lot of brick on the on what would be the west face or pool side of the brick, so that'll go very quick. That's mostly glass, which we'll actually start doing the framing here in the next couple of weeks for. So things are progressing well. From a project standpoint, as I mentioned, the two critical path items are the ends of the buildings, that north end and that southwest end, and then getting the manufacturing done for the pool slides so that we can actually start the installation of the slides themselves, which will be, the last couple of weeks of finishing the project. We'll work our way down, or out, I should say, out of the northwest corner of the site, out into Marsal, so that the playground vendor can come in after we get out of the way to do their thing and finish the project up. So right now, we're beginning of August for completion of the pools in those areas, and we're looking to improve that. The weather has been pretty conducive, but there's some things that we're waiting on that we need to finish that construction, so we're pushing that. So that's kind of where we're at from a progress standpoint. So again, you'll see a lot of bricks. So this is looking at that pool building on the north. That's essentially done now. You see those kind of little pockets, kind of looks like a castle. That's where our steel sets. We'll get that steel set. We'll get the metal decking on, which will allow us to do the roof. And this building to go pretty quick because there's not a lot of fancy finishes or anything in it. It's a lot of paint, some tile. We'll start pushing some heat in this area so that we can do some of those interior finishes and progress with the mechanicals also in this area too. This is the roof of the gymnasium that again is done. They had it staged now. There's still a few pieces of material up there for the adjacent roofs, so that's going well. And then this is kind of looking from the east to the west, so opposite direction. You can see the pools, that zero depth kind of baseball shape looking feature. We've got the walls around there now, and that lazy river is essentially done too with that top third of the wall. This is the brick, so it gives you a really good perspective of what the building's gonna look like, and that banding, very sharp, good choice of color here on the brick and all that. So that's that back corner. You can see all those pipes and stuff kind of sticking out of the ground. That's where we'll bring a lot of the primary electric in. That'll allow us to facilitate some of the other features of the building and keep that moving. Big thing is getting the illuminating company out. This is the 3 community rooms, so without the dividers, so you can see where it's framed out. So looking left would be where the pool area is in that deck area. So primarily in this area, once we get it completely framed out, you'll see drywall and what we call dense glass. It's a more exterior type of drywall. That'll be going on, and then the rest of that facade really is glass. We'll start the framing of the glass in a couple of weeks here, and then start getting glass in there to really get it enclosed. There's some temporary provisions that we're doing now to get the building enclosed so that we can facilitate finishes in this area. And this is the area that they're working on the roof now, so. This is the gymnasium, so if you were on the east side looking west back towards the rest of the building, but you can see it's primarily dry. We got a little bit of wet there that's been since taken care of, but we've got the ductwork in, the sprinklers are done in here, and so there's really not a whole lot more we have to do in the gymnasium other than put the windows in, which they'll start here pretty soon. And then the very last thing that we'll do once they do the painting and all that, again, that'll go pretty quick, is we'll get all the athletic equipment up. So you see the basketball backstops, the padding on the wall, those kind of things will go in, and then we'll put the floor in. So not a whole lot of work left in this particular area. This is one of the main bathrooms. I don't know which one, to be honest, looking at it, but they're all pretty much the same. You can see a lot of the plumbing accommodations are going in. So you see those little red dots, that's where toilets will go. That's a chase wall in there. So we're, doing interior plumbing. In the areas that we have roof, we started the overhead rough-ins for all our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. So that's good. Get the stuff up top done and kind of work our way down. So that's progressing well as well. As I mentioned, current upcoming activities, I won't go through them all, but you can kind of see them here just from a building and a pool standpoint. I think I've covered pretty much all these. So again, we're moving along well. We've been working pretty much every Saturday that we can, as long as the weather's conducive. Days like this don't help when you're doing exterior work because it kind of affects the work that we do the rest of the week. But we've got some good subcontractors out there, and they're working through a lot and making a lot of progress, which is great to see. And everybody's cooperating and as a team.
What I liked about this slide is just to show how many trades are working on the site right now at the same time. So
Great point.
it's a busy site, which is good.
Yeah, we fill the parking lot every day. So. Yeah, and again, just kind of a schedule overview. But we're looking to try to improve on this from a pool standpoint to try to maximize as much time for the city that they'll have in the summer to actually use the pool itself. And then, the building is trending about a month later than the pool right now. Again, always looking to improve that, just waiting on materials and what have you to get those in, so.
Perfect.
So then, a couple of next steps for us. I mean, certainly we'll take any questions that you may have, but we do have a few other items that we'll be coming to council for in the coming weeks. A couple of budget updates will be one. We have, as Gavin has mentioned previously in one of his updates, we have a couple of areas where we've hit some soils that did not meet the compaction requirements, so there was some remediation that we did from that standpoint. We're still reconciling some of the totals on that. And then we've also received the final proposals from DataServe in terms of some of the budget items that we have from an IT standpoint. So, you know, that actually came in under our budget at this point, but we're just need to reconcile the phone component of it. But once we have those, you know, compiled, we'll bring those and present them and give you the backup for it. The other is building signage, which, you know, works well for the other agenda item that we have tonight, but that is something that we would like some resolution on or some direction on as well. And then we'll continue to obviously give you construction updates as well.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Gavin. Did you want Mr. Trotter to come up, or do you want to just ask, let me have council ask these two we'll just ask council to have their questions with you two now, and then we can introduce Chris. Is that what you want to do? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, does any member of council have any questions? Mr. DeJohn?
Can you please tell me a little bit about the soil compaction problems you've had?
Yeah, certainly we'll explain it more in depth once we have it resolved. But as expected, there are some areas where the soils did not. We have a third-party testing agency that is out there that is observing the proof rolls, we call it, that ensures that we have good compacted soil for wherever we're putting our pavement or footers. And if you see some rutting as you're doing that process, and you have to sometimes remove some of that soil, and then either, we had excess soil, so it was kind of a swapping of some soils that we had to do on site. Sometimes you have to import material, but there's some of that we encountered that, again, I'll go through in more detail with you.
How much?
How much? That's what we're still reconciling. But
Because GDP, did testing over there and told us that the soil was good to build on, and that's why
again,
my colleagues went ahead with the project.
Again, the geotechs, this is with any, you're only taking an 8-inch cylinder, so that can't represent the entire site. We try to do the best sampling we can, and there was some areas that we did with the geotech that we noticed, but it was minimal, I would say, with the geotech that we encountered. But there are some areas that, in particular, by the parking lot and in the gym, that we encountered more than we anticipated.
I imagine there would be, since it was a garbage dump at one time, which you knew about before starting the project. So.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's like, this is beyond what we've encountered on other projects, but it's more than what we would have hoped for.
Mrs. Tressi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You showed the picture of the gym and the exposed ductwork. Is that going to remain exposed?
Yeah, it gets painted.
Oh, it gets painted?
Yeah, all that'll get painted and finished, similarly to Jason finishes.
Thank you.
And you'll paint the walls inside the gym, or
Yep. I don't know what color they are, but yeah, we've got full finishes in there. So it'll be painted out, the ceiling will be painted. And then there's what's called a tectum panel. It's a linear panel that'll go in a couple of bands in the gym. So that'll give it some contrast and everything, but also it'll dampen the sound in there too. So there's some other acoustical features. And then that deck, you couldn't tell from the pictures, but the deck in the gymnasium has holes in it that are, and the flutes of the deck are filled with insulation. So that's also sound absorbing. So even now, if you go in there, if you kind of talk or even yell in there, it's very dampening. So that'll be a good feature to have to dampen that noise while everybody's using it too, so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Balestrea?
Hey, Gavin, I saw the opening date and realized that's pushed back a couple weeks, that what we anticipated. Is that date now kind of confirm, knowing how far you are, number one, and number two, does that anticipate some inclement weather in there as well? Or are you assuming we're going to have a mild winter through?
Well, we're keeping our fingers crossed that we have the winter that we've had up to this point, no doubt, okay? But the good thing is we're actually ahead of schedule slightly from a pool standpoint, so we're looking to improve that date. And then the fact that we've been able to get as much of the building enclosed that we have is going to reap benefits as well on the project. So really right now, that driving factor on the pool side of things are getting those slides themselves. And there unfortunately is not a whole lot we can do about that from a manufacturing standpoint. We have meetings constantly with the manufacturer. You know, Chris's team, the engineering team, has pretty much been at our disposal from a question standpoint to keep things moving. So we're really just pushing the manufacturer to get those slides done, because you really can't open the pool without the slides from an install standpoint, because we got to work over everybody, and it has to do with the circulation and everything. So that's really the critical path, is those slides and pushing those. So if we can improve upon that, then we can improve upon those dates as well.
Yeah, that was my next question. If we could still open without having the slides fully completed, if there was
Yeah.
a delay just with the slides,
It's just not
and
safe.
have a workaround.
Yeah, it's not safe, and then those pools won't operate how they're supposed to from a circulation
Gotcha.
standpoint. So unfortunately, no. Now, what we're pushing to do, and most likely will happen, is that playground out front, because that's kind of the funnel of the project, of pushing everybody out, of getting out of their way so they can install the playground, and most likely that'll be happening once the pool is operational and going, but again, that'll go pretty quick, so it'll be short-lived.
So I have a question. What would be a cutoff date to possibly not open up the pool? Like, don't we close the pool down in the third week in August typically because of lifeguards and supplying? But my question is if we push it much further past August 3rd to open the pool, we all know how much it costs to open up a pool. And then there's also closing costs when you close a pool at the end of a season. So would it be worth filling those pools for 2 weeks? Or maybe look into that one Hastings company to get lifeguards just to fulfill the rest of the season? Because we typically have kids going back to college.
So
So-
the thing is, like, we have to look at this. If it ends up going later than expected and we're into August, I still think we need to fight to do that, because you almost need to look at it as like a soft opening. Like, there's going to be stuff that goes wrong, and if we don't open it, we won't know what's going wrong to fix it in the off season. And then how will that look the following season? All right, we're going to wait a whole nother year. Now we're going to open it. Now things aren't working. Besides, there's probably those things are probably under warranty, like a year warranty. So we kind of need to run that thing, even if it's for a couple weeks, to work out all the bells and make sure everything's running smoothly, and gives us the off season to make adjustments. So it's not going to be an easy task, regardless.
If I may add.
Sure.
You need the water in the pool for the cement plaster to cure as
Oh,
well.
good.
So it's an essential part of that process. It needs to be filled.
That's good to know. We don't know any of this, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, so a lot of those things, and you make a lot of good points, right? And I can't speak from a lifeguard standpoint or anything.
Right.
But a lot of that stuff Sean mentions, we have to do anyways, whether or not the pool opens to the public. We still have to fill it. We have to do all that for Department of Health reasons and get occupancy and all that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Diane?
Mr. Belstria?
No, just a follow-up for Sean, or maybe even the mayor. Could we extend the season, do you think, beyond Labor Day? Or if we can staff it? I mean, just because of the nuance? If we can staff it, I would say just go longer in the season. We have good weather all during
What
September.
are you doing after Labor Day? You got any availability?
That's my question.
So what if we just did it on the weekends?
Yeah, you know how to blow a whistle?
No Speedo. No Speedo for me.
What
You
if
don't
we
want me
just did
sitting
the
up there at
weekend,
all.
Sean?
No Speedo.
What Speedo? Wouldn't even
So,
see it.
yeah, that would be the challenge, is finding
Just
staff.
staffing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if we had the staff, would that even be a consideration?
Yeah.
It would definitely be a consideration, that's for sure. If we have the staffing, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It would be nice to keep it up and running for as long as we can, that's for
Right.
sure. But if I could, I noticed they were working today, despite the conditions out there, which was pretty amazing. And I just wanted to commend them for, they were making I mean, of course, it's all muddy. The Marsall was a mess, but they cleaned it up very nice. On the way here, I was surprised how clean it was. They did a very good job of taking care of the street there, so.
Yeah, well, thank you. We're trying to, be diligent, trying to be good neighbors, so.
Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Monaco.
It's okay, go ahead.
No, I had nothing.
Oh, you got nothing? Okay. Is the plenum used as an air return in these buildings, or is the return ducted in?
It's probably plenum, right? In some areas, it's probably a combination of both because you've got open areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if the air return is used as a plenum, you need to use cast iron in there. My question is, why did you use cast iron for the plumbing on the first floor when you could have used Schedule 40 PVC and saved some money?
So you're talking about the plumbing
Correct.
carriers?
The plumbing that
and
you just showed, yes.
What have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, arguably cast iron's a better product. It typically lasts longer. It's not uncommon. That's what we see from an engineering standpoint. So, and then with the cost of PVC and everything, you're not really seeing a lot of savings nowadays. I mean, you're seeing some, but not significant to the point from a quality, maintenance standpoint. But yeah, it's what you bring up. It's done on projects. But overall, we don't have a significant amount of plumbing. Like if it were a school, it had more fixtures or something, probably result in maybe some cost savings. Not as much on this particular project.
That would be quite a bit if you not using the plenum as an air return. You could run everything in PVC,
Yeah.
and then it would be quite a bit of saving.
Yeah, as Chris mentioned, we've got kind of a hodgepodge going through different areas and everything. So
A ducted return would add significant cost to the project too, though.
that's a good point.
So you gotta look at that offset.
Are there any other questions? Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Ward, how many lifeguards do you anticipate you'll need for the pools?
13?
Never happened.
So we'll probably need, there's probably 14 guards up when everything's running at top, max capacity. We'll probably have 14 or 15 guards. At Draga, back in 2019, before the slide went down and when we were busiest, we had 13. So there's probably a 1 or 2 guard increase in this new pool.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, I have a question for you. So I'm thinking still this season, not, next year and thereon after, but, so I know how hard it is to find guards anyways, but with the pool opening in August, you couldn't hire them like you typically go out, people are doing applications in February and March for lifeguarding in various cities. So how will we get lifeguards for August now? Or do you have people coming back?
Well,
I mean, I don't know what the plan is.
our hope is that it's not August. Our hope that it's earlier than August. So the plan is to, we're going to take day camp to the indoor pool at the high school. So we'll have guards there to teach them swim lessons. We'll bring our guards over and teach them swim lessons. Some of those guards will go with the field trip, day camp field trip on Wednesdays. And the fact that day camp is not going to be at the pool, they're going to have to spend most of their life in the field, out in the playing all day. They're going to need some additional help. So we're going to maybe think about moving some of those lifeguards over there to get them some hours. We were actually talking about, there's some kids that just need to work. They need money to pay for college or whatever. And then there's other kids that work because they want to work, but they don't necessarily need a ton of hours. So we just need to figure out what everyone's needs are and see if we can kind of make things work, you know.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I'm hoping that Gavin's got a better date for us somewhere in the future here, because they're working good. They're getting a lot done. I mean, they are.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Tracy?
So Sean, explain the lifeguard situations. We have the 35-foot slide. How many lifeguards are on that slide? One at the top, one in the middle, one at the bottom?
One at the top and one at the bottom. Isn't it a 40-foot slide?
Well, I think she's talking tower height, right? So no, it's not.
Okay.
I thought we lowered it.
It was
We did.
kind of a joke.
We did.
It's kind of a joke.
Thank you, Gavin. Right answer. Otherwise,
Kind of a joke.
because I have my notebook here that said we'll lower it. No, but I mean, I thought you needed three, like
No,
one
you
at the
need one at
top
the top and one at the bottom.
for that slide. What about the next slide?
One at the top for the top of the slide and one at the bottom. And they just have to be able to see one another to give signals. So once we get the sight lines, we'll figure out where that guard at the bottom has to be to signal up. And if there needs to be a radio or something, we can put something like that into effect.
And they're in that spot for their entire shift?
Well, lifeguards rotate. So
Well-
every 15 minutes they bump.
And go to
The
the next,
next.
right.
Yeah.
But
And every now and then there's an open spot, so you bump to a breast break. So, yeah.
okay, thanks. Yeah.
Mr. Mano, Mrs. Sabetta, do you have anything?
I just had one question concerning the staffing situation. The busiest days for the pool's probably gonna be Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, and events. Am I correct in assuming that?
I don't know what to expect. I mean, currently, right now, it's always been Monday through Friday because that's when our camp kids are there. But again, our pool that wasn't a big draw, this is, it could change. Could be the weekends.
I was, in reading the criteria for operations, it doesn't address having to have additional people or a rotation set up so that there's somebody there on the weekends. If you got everybody working during the week, then what happens come the weekend? How do you account for having enough people there to handle that situation?
Well, yeah, it's a lot of staff. It's a lot of staff because, if you were all a lifeguard, this half of the room might be workhorses and this half may only want to work 10 hours a week. It's just it just depends on who you get and what they want to do. So if you have an older staff, a more seasoned staff, usually they like to work more hours, And actually, we have in the past we have a bonus program where if if you work a certain number of hours, we give you a bump. So we like to reward the workhorses. So every year is different.
From council? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the update. It's exciting to see it.
Okay, and now we have Ryan Sowers here. As I said, Ryan has been advising us for several months now and on naming rights and sharing his expertise with us. And he's here to answer questions and kind of get to know you.
Okay. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey, how we doing? I will do a disclaimer real quick that I know nothing about water slides, soil composition, and I will not be wearing a Speedo at any time during my work with you. So I just want to make sure that's known.
That's good. Perfect.
That's a plus.
It's a plus, yeah.
Did you say that?
So what can I answer for you?
Well, maybe, why don't you
Want me
just
to
tell
introduce-
us, yeah,
introduce
introduce
myself
yourself.
a little bit?
Yeah,
Why don't you
and
tell
just
us something
tell
about
us a
you?
little bit about you and
Sure,
what,
yeah.
just like your resume, what you're all about.
Sure. So I have been in the philanthropic space for the last 8 years. the last 4 of which have been in Cleveland. I started my career actually in college. I ran a capital campaign for our students at Bowling Green State University in the Toledo area, raised about $40,000 as a student, and we invested those funds into a brand new campus gateway for our alumni. It was also a large piece of dance marathon where we raised money for our Children's Miracle Network Hospital, St. Vincent's in the Toledo area. That was mostly college. And then I told my mom, I said, hey, I'd like to go into fundraising professionally. And so I took the first job that would pay me to do what I love, and I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and I was the assistant director for the annual fund there, working mostly on annual size contributions, anywhere from 1,000 to 100,000 size gifts. From there, I took a job with Miami University in Oxford. I led the Telehawks, the telefundraising program, raised about $3.5 million, $3.1 million over 2 years from alumni, family, friends of the university right there in Oxford for Miami. And then I decided that I wanted to take a step back from higher education and focus more in the healthcare sector. And so I ended up jumping onto the Heart Mini campaign, the Heart Walk campaign. If you've been familiar with the American Heart Association before, have participated before, I led one of the largest in the country alongside of a team. We raised roughly between $3 and $4 million that year. I was responsible for several 5- and 6-figure gifts during that time, mostly corporate, mostly marketing, sponsorship-driven gifts. Very much philanthropic in nature, but more laden with marketing and more laden with what we're talking about now for your aquatic center. Then I got the beautiful opportunity to come to Cleveland to work for University Hospitals as a development officer in corporate relations. My job at UH, and then I'll transition because I do want to make sure there's a clear separation between my experience and what I'm doing now with respect to how I'm representing myself today with the council. So with University Hospitals, I have raised roughly $18 million over the last 4 years for the hospital. This is specifically from corporate partners, 2 of which I'm assuming A.M. Higley, correct? You guys work for it? That's where he's from. Yeah, sweet. So Gareth Vaughn, close friend of mine. Emily Lord, also a close friend of mine. Chris Strada, I've worked with Chris in a capacity with UH, in a fundraising capacity. Have received gifts to our hospital for event support, different naming rights, things like that. I've done basically everything with respect to the corporate sector. The largest campaign that I've been focusing on over the last 2.5 years is right down the road there, Ahuja Medical Center. I lead the entire corporate effort for that building. The first time around, when we did the first phase about 10 years ago, maybe we raised roughly $1 million. That was way before my time. This time around, we've raised about 6, and there's still plenty more coming in right now. I am laser focused on that project, and it's all naming rights. It's all naming rights from a variety of sizes, from 25,000 all the way up to 5 million, which I have been able to close and bring to fruition. In my role with University Hospitals, my job basically fits into 3 buckets, and this is something that I use every day, and I've probably said over 1,700 times because that's how many visits I've been on with corporate partners out in the community here in Cleveland. I work specifically, I have the largest portfolio at University Hospitals. I work with roughly 200 companies myself, but I'm aligned with roughly 400 to 500 companies in town. Both the large companies such as Sherwin-Williams, Parker Hannifin, Lubrizol, the big Fortune 500s, but then also the small mom and pops that really give us the grittiness and who we are here in Cleveland. As someone that I am not from Cleveland, I've learned a lot about it in the last 4 years, especially being a very active fundraiser during COVID. It was one of the most challenging times of my career. It was 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. almost every single day, trying to figure out every possible scenario for us to be successful. But my buckets that I'm responsible for, event engagement, event sponsorship, things like our golf outings, our galas, roughly over $1 million a year, easily that I am contributing towards our team. If you're looking at stats specifically to UH, I am within the top 10 of our fundraisers. The only development officer that is in the top 10, roughly raising somewhere around $5-6 million a year. To give that context, roughly a development officer should be raising about $1 million. So I'm doing 5 times the work of someone of my same stature, my same title. Quite frankly, I'm very good at what I do, and I love what I do. And I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to do what I do at an awesome, awesome place called UH. So that was the first bucket, event sponsorship, event engagement. Second bucket, which you're probably most interested in, is major gift solicitation. And so that is my bread and butter. That's how I've made my career, how I've made a name for myself and reputation for myself here in Cleveland. I work on anything from 6 to 7 figures and greater. I work to inspire folks in the philanthropic space and really focus on programs, places, and people. Those are the 3 major areas in which I focus my fundraising efforts. The last bucket I'm responsible for, and I will always do my disclaimer, which I say in every single one of my visits, I'm not the purse strings at UH. I'm not the business decision maker. I work with all the folks that are and help to create better relationships between our partners, such as Level Heads, such as A.M. Higley, and ensuring that we're better aligned, because for a long time, and still hospitals are in this position, it's very transactional, antiquated relationships, but not at UH. When I came in, I completely transformed our program. I took it from a flailing $4 million program and really undid everything that was wrong and took a bet on myself and the strategies that I had learned over the last 8 years. And I'm happy to say last year we closed roughly $14-15 million as a corporate team. I'm ascending through the system at UH. I am very lucky to be where I'm at. I have made a name for myself in the community, both in the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. I sit on 4 nonprofit boards, Providence House, Breakthrough Schools, Red Cross of Greater Cleveland, and United Cerebral Palsy of Greater Cleveland. I'm also on the Regional Advisory Council, Region Advisory Board of Farmers National Bank, and have really positioned myself in a way to align myself naturally with corporate partners all across the region. I guess the last thing I'll say about my resume, which I probably read it all at this point, I was one of the top 20 in their 20s, voted on by Cranes. I'm now 30, so I'm going for 40 under the 40. I got 10 years to figure it out. I think I will. I'm also in the current leadership class at the Cleveland Leadership Center for Bridge Builders, roughly a cohort of 60 emerging leaders here in the region that are coming up through the system, coming up through UH, trying to leave Cleveland better than we found it. I ultimately want to stay here for the rest of my time, want to raise a family here. I want to continue building on the reputation and the foundation I've already built. This is why that I've created my own consulting firm, RKS Consulting, and I am bringing on a very intentionally small book of business because I'm trying to do good with people that are doing business and trying to help them to achieve their goals. This is a project that I've been working on probably for the better part of a year, pro bono, just doing it because of a personal favor of a friend that asked me to take a look, to give it the old sniff test, see what's going on, see how you're trying to market it, seeing how you could do this. I did a valuation on the project for free. I was never planning on making any money here. I just did it because I thought it was the right thing to do and to help my community. And again, to do as a personal favor to one of my friends. And I've seen a lot of interest in this project, and I've seen a lot of passion behind it and the people that are working on it, and I'm really inspired by that. And that's why I wanted to work on it with you. I think one point that makes me different from probably my competitors in this space is that I am not in it for the money. Most of my competitors will ask you to give them 5% of what they raise. I disagree with that ethically. I do not take a commission on the philanthropic dollars of our community. Instead, I would just go off a very small retainer fee and probably save you 90%. Because again, I'm not in it for the money. I'm trying to do something better for the community. So let me pause there. I'd love to answer questions because I feel like I've just talked for roughly 20 minutes. I hope you know me. I feel like we can grab a cup of coffee at this point. But would love to answer any questions. If you have any more questions about my background, my experience, my company, and how I'm trying to grow here in Cleveland and trying to help you.
Okay, let me open it up to council. Mr. Bellistrea?
Ryan, very well spoken, so welcome. My question is, my understanding is that you're going to try to use your expertise to teach
Sure.
the
Yes.
mayor or whoever his designee may be to do what you do. Why not do it yourself? I mean, why are we taking this approach? I mean,
Sure, sure. So to be honest, it's mostly from a conflict of interest standpoint. If there is a donor that is a large donor to UH, I have certain ethical pieces that I probably shouldn't be involved in those conversations. For example, let's just throw out like a name like Seth Ehrman. He's a wonderful, wonderful community member, and he is a very major donor to UH. It'd probably be inappropriate for me to be making an ask on behalf of the city of Mayfield Heights. But what I can do is build the strategy and to equip someone to be very successful in the space using only public information. I would not be pulling from the information that is proprietary to UH, my databases, donor databases that I cannot use from a compliance standpoint. Also very, very in tune with our compliance pieces. This is why I'm supported by UH to be here right now, to be able to have my own business. But that's really why. Now, in certain cases, if this individual or company or foundation is nowhere on the radar of university hospitals, I'd be happy to make the ask alongside of a member of your government here. With whether it's the mayor, with another designee, whoever it is, I'm happy to do that. But it's just to make sure that I am protecting the compliance standards that I hold very true to myself, and to protect also the relationships that could be here, because, kind of everyone knows everybody in Cleveland.
it just seems like we have, with a corporate park that we have and the major corporations in the surrounding communities, the Village, Beechwood, the surrounding communities, that I'm sure there's plenty that we can tap into that are not in your portfolio.
Exactly.
For
Exactly.
UH. And that's kind of where I was heading, I mean, I understand the conflict of interest, but what about those other donors that may not be?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I would love to build strategy books, build, strategy briefings, and then be able to go do that on your behalf. I think, though, too, I only have so much weight as an individual here. I believe that it will be more strategic and more impactful if there was a designee, or if the mayor was alongside of me, because there's a different weight to the mayor of Mayfield Heights or Ryan Sowers. So that would be, to answer your question, yes, I would love to be able to make these asks to partners that
Okay,
are not in conflict.
that's good to know, thank you.
Mr. DeJohn?
So does that mean the conflict of interest that A.M. Higley, we couldn't solicit them?
No, you could. You could. That'd be probably a pretty easy one to talk about. Now, in that case, I would, just arm you with all the things that are out there in the public that I think would be a good alignment. I have a specific skill set in this sector, especially with the vendor population. Both Gareth Vaughn, CEO of A.M. Higley, and probably Chris could speak to that. I've worked with both of them before. I have a very tactful way of going about the work that I do, and would be able to arm the mayor or designee to be very successful.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
So there's obviously no guarantees,
There's no guarantees. That's the hard part about this.
right?
I would
So-
just like to save you 90%. If they were to raise every single penny, you're probably going to pay one of my competitors upwards of $100,000. And for me, I am only as good as the list that you have, the connections that we could leverage, the power and influence of the council, of this local government, of the community partners here. It just takes one match to light the fire. It's just picking the right match to light the fire. And I think that if you were to present, a list of donors to me, we could do that. But you're right, there are no guarantees, but
So if we don't have if the pool opens in August, we'll just say, we'll just use that date, because that's a date we were, July. And we don't have the rooms, with names, or we don't have areas that have been purchased or donated, or however we're saying this.
Sure.
I know we're only paying you through September or October. Are you going to see us through till the end of this? Or maybe
So-
start stepping in if, I'll say you're going to do a good job, but if he's not doing a good job of doing this, where are we going to have that extra help
Sure.
to make it happen?
So
I guess
I'm
is what I'm
hap-
asking you.
I'm happy to stay on to see this through. If we want to set a minimum threshold of what we're trying to raise with my help, and then beyond that, we can continue to talk about how I can engage and help you be successful. I
Could
believe.
you give us the year, till the end of the year?
Oh, sure, yeah, of course.
I mean, because we're only, I'm just saying, because your contract or whatever you
Oh,
laid
yeah,
out was
yeah.
only till, what was it, September? 7 months.
Yeah,
So-
that just gets down to logistics. I'm happy to extend. And like I said, when I was talking about how I'm building my business, it's very small intentionally because I only have so much time as I'm very engaged in the community, very engaged with my role at UH, and I'd be happy to extend my time if necessary. Be happy to see this through.
Okay. Mrs. Tracy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Sowers, so are you anticipating we're going to give you the list, or do you have a donor list that you're going to pull from?
Most likely, it would be based on the referrals from the city and from the mayor and from close trusted partners on the project. That would be where we start, just as any other major project would be. Just as is Ahuja Phase 2, it's a $236 million project, and where I first started was, who are we spending our dollars with? And can we inspire them to potentially give back philanthropically to the project? That's a built-in list already. In addition to that, it would be other community partners that maybe I don't know, because I'm not from Cincinnati, or I'm from Cincinnati originally, I'm not from Cleveland. But I mean, in our first initial meetings, there seemed to be a fair group of people that we could pull upon that already naturally exist. It would just be a matter of activating those relationships and doing so in a tactful and respectful way, and really trying to inspire folks to get engaged with this project, which I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't believe in it, that it was going to positively impact the community. And so there's a lot of different ways we can look at the project and how we can position it to certain groups. But I think most of it will be lists that are provided to me to help do the work together.
That you'll go out and sell?
Yes.
You're a very good salesman.
Oh, thank you very much. All right. Also, no
Picked
one.
up on that.
Oh, good.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so that you'll go out and sell, but I thought you're not going to be the spokesperson. You're going to guide the mayor and what
I think
he's
it's going to be a
say.
combination. I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I think I've got to really express being very judicious with how I throw my weight around, and how I enter into certain conversations. And so I will make sure well ahead of these conversations to ensure that that either the mayor or designee is very well armed, or I'd be alongside of them. And so really, I would just need their weight next to me to be able to close something for you.
But being the driving force behind the mayor going out, that's not a conflict, correct? I mean,
No.
with some of the businesses, it would be, but
Could you say that one more time?
like if you're the driving force to get him to go to some of these and speak on our
Sure.
behalf. You're saying there's a conflict, or there may be a conflict with some of the people he might be reaching out to with UH. There could be, right?
There might be, but
Okay.
it'd be being able to arm him with everything possible to be successful,
Okay.
and to be really thoughtful in the strategy and approach to it. I think there'll be a lot less cases of that than we think.
Okay.
You know, as we were looking at the original list that he was presenting in our first initial conversation, I didn't know any of them, which is a great thing. I don't want to know any of them. That means that I can be your workhorse.
Right.
You know, but with certain people, we just have to be sensitive to certain things. But this is not atypical. I mean, just as when I have to put on my board chair, my board hat for United Cerebral Palsy, it's very different when I'm fundraising for UH as opposed to UCP, Providence House, Breakthrough Schools, Red Cross. So I just have to be very careful and judicious, but I'm used to that space to be careful.
Okay, great, thank you. Mrs. Tressi?
What benchmarking has already been done to determine what the true value is in naming this building?
Sure. So around town, you can most likely find something similar. I think we've done some loose benchmarking. I've seen projects like this. I've seen, some of the gifts that are coming out of areas of the east side of Cleveland.
Can you
And
name some?
some of the gifts?
Some of the areas and the gifts that, yeah,
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question.
yeah.
We're seeing a fair amount of businesses in the east giving. For example, Eaton. Eaton, they make anywhere from 6 to 7 figure gifts fairly regularly to institutions all around it. You also have Progressive, but that would take a little bit of time to work on. Progressive doesn't really get involved in the community as they should. They more so exist here locally. So it's trying to activate that relationship, but I've seen them do some types of obviously with the field downtown, but it's looking at things like that. Other businesses in the east here that I've been working with, Park Place Technologies, Parker Hannafin, both have made 6 and 7 figure contributions around town. Specific with Parker Hannafin, when you get closer with their foundation and their leadership, it allows for you, and this is kind of giving away some trade secrets here for fundraisers, but that's all right. But as you get closer with certain leaders within, with certain companies, and I'm sure that already relationships like this exist, it allows you for the ability to make larger asks. Some places like Lubrizol, like Parker Hannafin, they have more of a peanut butter strategy approach. They like to spread it fairly thin, but do a lot of them, 5,000s and 10,000s. They spread it everywhere. But when you can build the relationships locally, like I'm assuming that our city council, but also our mayor and local centers of influence have, it allows for these gifts to happen. Parker Hannafin, I know, is being solicited for probably $2.5 million from an organization in town, and they're really considering it. So these things happen. These big 6 and 7 figure gifts do happen. On the individual side, they happen probably more frequently, but probably more anonymously, because I'm a good salesman, right? If I start finding out about certain people making certain gifts, I'm a very good salesman. They don't want me knocking on their door. So a lot of gifts at that size are made anonymously or made through trusts or foundations that are led by a group of people. So I hope that answers the question. I think we
Thank
could be
you,
doing
Ryan.
we could be doing more benchmarking.
Okay. Is there any further questions from other people? Mr. DeJohn? The meeting will be starting in a couple minutes, so I just wanted to.
Thank you, Madam President.
What's wrong with you people?
Have you,
Don't want to know. You already
are there
know your
any
answer.
other cities locally in Cleveland that have sponsored something, that have sponsors, naming rights to anything in their cities?
Oh, I'm sure there are. Now we can do that benchmarking research to look into that, but I'm sure there has to be. I mean, Van Aken and Pinecrest, just thinking about those, they're not necessarily named yet, but they could be named in a heartbeat. Just gets down to the developers being interested in that if they want to sell the naming rights. And that's where someone like a competitor of mine may want to be in that space to reap the benefit of that situation if they were to need an influx of cash. But I'm sure that there are government entities across the region that do have those types of partnerships. I think because I am not from Cleveland, I have a hard time telling you right off the top of my head, but I would definitely be able to do the research to find. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay. Thank you so much for your time
Yep.
tonight.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Mano. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting has been adjourned. right. What is it? It's a resolution, right? Okay. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the February 27th council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestrea.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Somewhere in here. Yeah, just give me. Next is the approval of the minutes for our council. I hope everyone has had time to read these minutes over. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta.
One change.
Se- Mr. Balestrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th paragraph, it says, Mr. Balestria shared that the topic was discussed with the committee, and I named the roads. Either I named them incorrectly or it was transcribed incorrectly, but it says Bellingham and Sunningdale would need to be done. It should have been Westerham
Oh, I have Russ right.
on page 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right on.
It's right in one
diff-
area on
yeah,
page
wrong in
2.
the other. Right,
Okay.
correct.
All right, we'll make that change.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Are there any other changes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes have now been approved as written, with the correction added. Does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? Thank you. Seeing none, we will move to reports of officers, beginning with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. By now, residents should have received a copy of the city's annual City Focus. And I'd just like to emphasize, I don't know, I hope everybody looks at it and keeps it as the resource that it is, because it has a lot of phone numbers, contact information, project updates, and a lot of information on what goes on in the city and, for instance, police calls, squad calls from the fire department, all that's on there. So it's a good source for the residents to keep and really get a handle on what's going on in the city. Also, speaking of very good resources for this city, I'd like to remind our residents of the great resource that Community Partnership on Aging is. If you go to our website and look up the CPA's page on our website, you'll find a lot of programs and resources to help our residents. Like, for example, there's a pantry box pickup program. The box includes only non-perishable goods, not produce, and every fourth Monday of the month from noon to 2, those who qualify can pick up a pantry box through the Commodity Supplemental Food Program at the Richmond Heights Community Center, or I think it's at the Lyndhurst Center too. No, it's just the Richmond Heights, but our residents can go pick those pantry boxes up. And also, they have a new Connect to You program, which is a free program to connect friends, family, and the world using technology for our older residents. So it's kind of like a tech program for them. So they're offering 8 tech education classes starting on March 8th from 1 to 2 at the Richmond Heights Library. And you may be able to receive a tablet and a 1-year prepaid internet service after completing the classes. So there's age and income requirements to a lot of these programs, but I encourage our residents to please go on the website, look up that information, and look up those resources from CPA because they really do a lot of good for our residents. Also, Our renovations to the police lobby are moving rapidly along. The project should be finished in a couple weeks. It's looking very good. And the long-awaited Krispy Kreme store, located on Mayfield Road, will open for business tomorrow. So I know many people have been anxiously awaiting the opening of Krispy Kreme, so tomorrow's the day, and enjoy yourselves. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Okay, we'll move to Director of Law, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. All right, and Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I have no report this evening either.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will now move to our boards. If your board has met, this is your time to give your report, beginning with the Building Committee, Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mayor President. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. We'll move to Legislative Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. No report.
Okay. Public Works and Service, Mr. Balestria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a report. Even though the committee did not meet, just for the record, I want to let the council know, and the majority of council is aware that the reconstruction that we had originally decided to do from the committee and approved by council initially of Sunningdale and Westernham will not be performed due to the pool opening. It will be delayed, most likely to the following year, and ranch land was substituted as a reconstruct from Oakville to Ridgeberry. So just to make sure we got that in the record, that we're not going to perform Westernham and Sunningdale in the 23 road program. And then also tonight, I have Resolution 2023-24 before you for the 2023 sidewalk program. That's the consultation and engineering fee for GPD, and I encourage council to approve that resolution. And that's my report.
Thank you. Did you say from Oakville to Ridgeberry, so not the entire street?
Not the entire street. Right, Joe? Yeah, correct.
So
It
there-
wasn't necessary.
Okay, so there will be like something with the monies would be different, right, the cost?
We'll know those once everything
Okay.
comes back.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Balestria? All right, Parks and Recreation, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no formal report, but tomorrow evening in these chambers, at 6:30, there'll be a parade committee meeting, followed by a park and rec meeting at 7 p.m. Public's invited.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning Appeal met on February 14th. Council should have the meeting minutes. There's one item on the agenda tonight. I encourage the applicant present to address council during this public portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. And Planning Commission, Mr. Balestria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The commission did not meet, so I have no report.
Thank you. We will now move to public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to city code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes allotted for the entire public portion. If you are here this evening in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. Please fill out a form located on the table at the entrance of the chambers of council. During the public portion, I will call each of you wishing to speak to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record and speak clearly into the microphone. It is now 7:16. I will open up the public portion. Is there anyone that would like to be heard? Okay. Seeing none, we will now close the public portion. It is still 7:16. We will now move to Resolution starting with Resolution 2023-20. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-20, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Dave Ditar, sign erectors on behalf of Ken Ganley Nissan, 6060 Mayfield Road, a variance to install 110.55 square feet of W1 signage on the front wall of the building, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 863-03-042. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Teresi, second by Mr. Mano. This was a 4-0 vote in favor of granting a sign variance to Ganley Nissan dealers. They are changing the sign and adding the word Ken. Mrs. Sabetta, would you like to add to this?
Yes, thank you. This is a request for a 10.55 square foot variance. Business signage name change. It's a change-out sign. Requesting to keep the size due to the following of the bottom rule line that the letters sit on and are attached to, and for visibility. Existing Ganley sign to be removed and replaced with new, updated Ken Ganley sign. Using the same size lettering, matching the Ken into Ganley at the same location on the frontage. This is a proper approach with minimum variance. Final dealership in a project. It was a unanimous vote and 4 members were present.
Thank you. Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. Mrs. Sabetta, it says 110.55 square feet. In the minutes, it says 10.55 square feet. Is it 110 or 10.55?
The variance is 10.55. The whole lottage of the signage on the front is 110.55.
And do you know what it was?
It was originally 100.
I'm just checking. I'm just
Okay,
making sure.
The allotment is 100.
Thank you.
You're really just putting a Ken, K-E-N-N, a space before and a space after. That's what's causing, the 10.55 square foot variance.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been. We'll now move to Resolution 2023-21. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2023-21, a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a memorandum of understanding on behalf of the city with the Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Monaco, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr.
Second.
Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. The amount needed to add to this fund would not exceed $14,000. This is used for watershed improvement projects, assistance with EPA reports, and aiding in accomplishing necessary goals in the city of Mayfield Heights. Does any council member have any further questions or comments? Mr. Balestrea.
Just a question, maybe for the finance director, I'm not sure, but is this the normal price we've paid every year, or is this, seems like it's a minimal amount, but
It is a minimal amount. It is an annual contract that we enter into with them, and something that definitely the city engineer recommended we do again this year.
it's the same price?
Yes, in the same,
Mr. Murphy.
The last one was 10,300, this one's 14,000.
Okay, so a little increase. Thank you.
300.
Mrs. Fagan, is it 14,000 for the rest of the year? Is that what it is? Or 14,000 per month?
No,
14,000 per year.
it's an annual thing.
12
yes.
months.
Thank you.
For the next 12 months.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anything further? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2023-21 has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2023-22, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-22, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with IO Solutions to provide civil service promotional testing services in the city of Mayfield Heights and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mr. Monaco. This resolution is for the acceptance of a contract for the hiring of IO Solutions. They are a professional testing company and will administer professional testing to the police and fire department. The total project cost is $35,550. In your packet, you should have received a memorandum with the breakdown of their rates and how the service is used. Does any member of council have any questions? Mrs. Fagan?
Just one minor correction. The 35,000 is broken out each for a police sergeant and fire lieutenant, so the total would be double that, would be the 71,100.
71,100. So for each, okay.
Yes.
So does it state the total project cost
Don't matter how many.
in the
Just
resolution?
two contracts.
No.
Mrs. Fagan, in the resolution, does it state the 71,000? I
I'm
thought,
going to actually read that now.
I think it didn't, but
Doesn't have any price, does it?
it doesn't. It
Yeah, I
just
do not
says-
see a dollar amount in the actual resolution.
But the 15,000 is. Or no, that's not the one.
No.
No.
Okay, yeah.
There's no price in the resolution.
Just in the statement.
Right.
There's two statements of work attached to it as an exhibit, and each is for the 35,500.
Okay. All right. Does any member of council have any questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been now adopted. Moving to Resolution 2023-23, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-23, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to take all steps necessary to apply for and accept a subgrant from the Ohio Department of Public Safety to provide funding to assist in the purchase and installation of body cam redaction software and kiosk replacement, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria and second by Mrs. Tressi. The city has been awarded a subgrant from the Ohio Department of Public Safety in the amount of $15,854. This will assist in the purchase, installation of body cam reduction software and kiosk replacement for the police department. Chief Mealy is here this evening to answer any questions, if you have anything further that you need to know. Mr. Balestria.
Just one. Chief, if I may address the chief, Are all the officers now fully equipped with body cams?
Yes, they have been for years.
Yeah.
I think we're in our
Even all-
fifth year of having
Even-
body cams.
Okay. Even the
And-
supervisors as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
In fact, even some of our specialty units, like the SWAT team, they wear them on search warrants and different things. This is free money. It doesn't require the city to match, so this, it should be a no-brainer. We've got a $3,000 laptop computer that needs replaced that handles all the body cam video. It's the kiosk that all the chargers report back into and download into, and then that gets uploaded into a server. And in addition to that, the redaction software, which costs about a little over $12,000, gives us the capability to blur out faces or to mute audio. So that helps us protect witnesses, victims, juveniles that might be on video, because this is most of the video is open to public records requests. So unless we have that type of capability, we just have to give them the video and hope that something doesn't get shown that shouldn't get shown.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any further questions or comments? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This motion has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2023-24, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-24, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an amendment to the agreement with Klaus, Pyle, Schomer, Burns, and DeHaven, Inc., DBA GPD Group, to provide professional consulting engineering services in connection with the city's 2023 sidewalk replacement program and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Sabetta. This is the contract from the GPD Group to provide the professional services for the 2023 sidewalk program in the amount of $30,500. Does any member of council have any questions?
I do.
Mr. Monaco?
I was just wondering, why don't we have our own inspectors do this sidewalk inspection? I understand that the administration part needs to be done by GPD, but why aren't we saving some money by having our own qualified inspectors to do those inspections?
I have an answer for.
Go ahead, Bob can answer.
Mr.
think-
DeJohn?
If I remember right, in that committee meeting, which I served on, they wanted to take the politics out of it. So we felt more comfortable with the GBD group that they can do this in a non-biased way. Mike, is that in your understanding?
Mr. Balestrea?
Yeah, and also to add, when we did the numbers, it was a wash. It was basically for our inspectors to go out and do the inspections, number one, to determine which blocks needed to be done, and you're paying, our folks to do that, and then having them come back out to inspect it. It was better just for the engineering group to do it all in one fell swoop, and the dollar amount was virtually a wash. So that's why we just,
And then,
hire them to do the whole job.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Mayor?
I know we've had the discussion in the past about that, and also it was the expediency of having GPD do it and not having to wait for our guys to do the inspection and slowing down the contractor who was actually pouring the sidewalk. So GPD could get it done in a much more efficient manner than, maybe our guys can't get to it that day, and they're ready to pour or something. We've had that discussion in the past, I know that.
Okay, any other further questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2023-24 has been adopted. At this time, I'll ask council if you would like to, if I have a motion to remove Resolution 2023-16 from the table. This pertains to Mr. Sowers that was here this evening, the committee of the whole meeting.
Motion.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by, it's not on here.
It's not on here.
It was on our previous one, but they forgot to put it on this one.
It's tabled.
It was tabled.
What was the number, Diane?
2023-16. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't.
Put it in my packet. Okay.
I didn't either.
Did you want to just hand that to me so I could read that part, top part? Okay. All right.
Don't go too far with it.
I've only had one person say they would motion to accept,
I'll
to
second.
remove it. Second by Mr. Balestria,
That's just to take it off the table.
Mhm.
Remove from table.
to remove it from the table. Roll call on the motion to remove this resolution from the table.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. So Resolution 2023-16 has been added to the agenda. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-16, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with RKS RJ Consulting, LLC, to provide for consulting services regarding the naming rights procedure for the Aquatic Center and Community Center in the city of Mayfield Heights and declaring an emergency. Second reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta
Second.
and second by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
No.
Mr. Monaco.
Nope.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
It's tabled. It's,
It's 4-3.
no, I'm sorry, it's on third reading now. Right?
No, yeah, we don't have enough to suspend the rules.
Right.
No,
Okay.
4-3?
It's 4-3, so it stays on second reading.
Yep.
Okay. All right, we will move to ordinances, beginning with ordinance number 2023-7. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2023-07, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $33 million for notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of constructing, reconstructing, furnishing, equipping, and otherwise improving municipal facilities comprising an aquatic and community center, including all necessary related improvements and appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria and second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second.
second by Mr. Balestria. Mrs. Fagan, along with Mrs. Scully, met to discuss the best way to handle the bonds and notes. These come due in July, and there are two ways to move the bonds and notes. All members of council should have received the email explaining the sale and issuing of these payments for the aquatic and the community center. These next two ordinances pertain to this, and what direction they feel would be right. So Mrs. Fagan, do you want to add anything to this?
I think you summed that up very well. What I will say is that we are presenting both of these at a not-to-exceed $33 million amount. We are looking for a total borrowing of $33 million. The amount we're borrowing will not increase, but by having both of these out there in a not-to-exceed amount, it gives us the flexibility when we go to the market to see what our best option is at that time in the marketplace. Tentatively, what we're looking at is probably $24 million in bonds and $9 million in notes that will be rolled over for 1 year.
Okay.
And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Okay. All right, roll call on the, thank you, Mrs. Fagan. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn,
No.
Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance number 2023-08, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2023-08, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $33 million of bonds for the purpose of paying costs of constructing, reconstructing, furnishing, equipping, and otherwise improving municipal facilities comprising an aquatic and community center, including all necessary related improvements and appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano and second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belstrea, second by Mr. Monaco. And this pertains to exactly what we were talking about in the previous one. Are there any further questions for Mrs. Fagan? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This ordinance has now been approved. We will now move to ordinance number 2023-09. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2023-09, an ordinance amending ordinance number 2021-32, providing for the organization of certain administrative departments and fixing the salaries and bonds for certain officers and employees therein, by adding the position of Assistant Director of Public Service to Exhibit A, Section 8, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved?
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta. Second by Mr. Belstrea. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belstrea, second by Mr. Monaco. This ordinance would be reinstituting the position of the Assistant Service Director. This position has not been filled for a few years now, and the mayor is requesting that we consider having this position reinstated. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? Mr. Belstrea.
Just one for Mrs. Fagan, I guess. Is the salary range consistent with the Assistant Director of Finance range, so we're on the same level?
Absolutely, it's exactly the same.
Exactly the same. All right, thank you.
Are there any other further comments or questions? Mr. Monaco.
I'm just surprised we didn't have one already. I mean,
We did.
we did? What happened?
No, we had a position, but it wasn't filled.
Yeah, we had a position, but we didn't have a,
Right, wasn't
Okay.
filled. All right, good. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this ordinance now has been approved. We'll move to motions, and motion A, beginning with, or motion A, Mr. Murphy. beginning with Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, I think. Motion to authorize prepayment to Veridex in the amount of $4,837.81 for screening and planters for the new Aquatic and Community Center.
Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Monaco, or Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Belstrea. Thank you. A memo was sent to all members explaining on January 23rd, we authorized advance payment to Veridex in the amount of $4,837 for the exterior screens and planters for the new aquatic center. This particular company wants to be paid in full before the order is processed and shipped to us. The representative to Leggett tried to find another company to supply these, but was unable to find one. This motion is simply to prepay for all of these planters and screens. Does any member of council have any questions? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this motion has been approved. Is there any question, or any new business or comments from council? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mrs. Sabetta. Second by Mr. Balestrea. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, we are now adjourned.